longer frozen. Let's see. Is there a way for them to put names on that did not sign? If so, how do we check if we have? Vote.u, utah.gov. I've got that. Someone on the Instagram chat has posted to a website that has a searchable index of the Lieutenant Governor's site. You can also do Control F. That's the easiest way to do that. Delena's Cats on Instagram says there's a large number of people that did not sign finding their names on the signing. There's some anecdotal stories about that. If you think that your name is on there that it shouldn't be, you should probably look at it. And then if that's the case, there will probably be more criminal investigations. There is a criminal investigation underway in Utah County because of a large number of signature packets that came in that had what looked to be forged signatures. And they're investigating that, and whatever consequences come out of that, the people will have to face that. Speaking of criminal investigations, did you get the text this morning from the Republican National Committee and Utahns for Representative Government? Did you get that text? I know a lot of people did. And the reason I know a lot of people did is because a lot of people started asking me about it. The text. Let me see if I can make this. How do I do this here? Nope, that's not going to work. Anyway, the text, and I can't show it online here, but it has a graphic. It's red, and in all caps it says Utah Alert, and there's a clock in the corner. And it says, warning, be careful about people asking for your information about petition signatures. We have received reports these paid canvassers work for a firm under criminal investigation in another state. Don't give them your information. Just say no. And then it says stop to end. And there's a disclaimer on it. It says paid for by the Republican National Committee, authorized by Utahns for Representative Government. So this is a campaign from the Prop 4 repeal group. I tried to ask Rob Axson. I said, hey, what is this about? What is this what is this company that is allegedly contacting people about their about signing up a petition, and what state are they under investigation in? He did not answer. I reached out to the Republican National Committee. They did not answer. I reached out to, so the one thing I thought of is this part of the effort to get people to take their name off of the petitions, to remove the petitions? Better Boundaries, which is the group that was initially behind Proposition 4. They have launched a campaign. They are contacting people who have signed the petition saying, hey, maybe you didn't understand what this was about. Here's what it is, and here's how to take your name off. And it's kind of working. I mean, they've had, I've looked at signature, I've looked at the signature lists all the way back to January 23rd, and I've identified about 1,200 people who have taken their names off so far. 727 of them were on Friday. That's the wild card in all of this. So even if they reach the plateau in 22 more Senate districts, there's the possibility they could drop below those totals from people taking their names off. And that's going to stretch beyond the verification, because once the name is posted online, there's a 45-day window. So I thought that maybe this text message that came out today was somehow talking about the campaign by Better Boundaries to to get people to remove their names. I reached out to Better Boundaries today. They're like, we have no idea what they're talking about. We're not using an outside group. In fact, their response to me was, we have not contracted with a firm. So if there is one, they are not affiliated with us. All the work that has been done is from Utahns. So the Better Boundaries campaign that's not what this is referencing. There's no information about what this firm is or what state they're under investigation, and no one's answering those questions. So you have to wonder if this is just more gamesmanship, trying to, muddy the water, so that people will think, hey, I saw this text and now someone's contacting me about petition and they're under investigation in another state. I mean, it uses all the buzzwords, right? They're under a criminal investigation in another state, ignoring the fact that the firm that Utah's representative government used initially to gather signatures is under criminal investigation in Utah, because there were a whole bunch of signatures that looked like they were forged down in Utah County. But this text went out. Expect more of this. Expect a lot of this. And if they somehow do qualify for November's ballot to put this repeal on there, it's going to be crazy. I mean, there's going to be so much of this stuff floating around. Let me look on YouTube here. Let's see. League of Women Voters of Utah said, what influence did Trump and the Eagle Forum have? I think some. I think there's some. I don't know how much, but I think that they certainly played a part. As you remember, Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago urged people to sign the petition. We had Turning Point USA here, or sending out or organizing a bunch of they were organizing some signature gathering events. On Saturday, J.D. Vance tweeted out the vice president his support for this. Eagle Forum was pushing for it as well. There was an email blast sent out by Gail Ruzicka in the Eagle Forum that said, sign the petition to, and I'm paraphrasing here, secure the blessings of liberty or something. And that's very Eagle Forum. I would have been surprised if they didn't say something like that. So I'm sure that it hit with the target audience. And this repeal effort is being driven by the Republican Party, and it's Republicans who are signing these repeal petitions. As I've said before, I've been able to match the signatures that have been verified with Utah's voter file. If you'll look on it, you'll see the voter ID number. That's what I can match. I can match a voter ID number with someone in the voter database. And I've been able to match probably 80% of those names. As we've explained before, a lot of names are private. A lot of information is private. I can't see who they are. Even if their voter ID is on this website, I can't match them to the voter file. But I can match those who have not marked their information as private. I can match the voter file. And what I've seen is at least 2/3 of the people who have signed this so far and had their signatures verified, it's Republicans. 67, 68% are Republicans. Probably another 20% are non-party, are independents. They don't belong to any party, but they probably lean pretty Republican. Democrats, we're looking at maybe 6% of the total. Most of the signatures are in Utah County. I've got that number here somewhere on a spreadsheet. Let me see if I can find it here for you so we can just look at it. Yep, here we go. Now, those are raw numbers. I haven't calculated the percentages yet. I'll put that in a story this week. So, going through some other comments. Laner801 says, even if it gets on the ballot and we win that vote, what's to stop them from just not following through like they did with Prop 4 already? I don't know what you're talking about, Laner. The reason why they're putting this on the ballot is because the legislature tried to repeal Prop 4 after it was passed by the citizenry, and the Utah Supreme Court says you can't do that. You cannot repeal an initiative that was passed by the voters, because the voters have the same equal power as the legislature to enact laws, to reform government. Any changes the legislature wanted to do, according to the Utah Supreme Court, those changes had to be targeted, and they had to be leave it. They had to be extremely targeted to fix one specific thing, and repealing the entire initiative, that's not targeted, right? That's not targeted at all. So what they did was unconstitutional. This is why you're hearing lawmakers bellyache about super laws, that the Supreme Court created super laws. They did not create a super law. They just said that the legislature cannot repeal a law that was passed by the legislature, because you would just get in this tit for tat back and forth where the a ballot initiative gets passed, the legislature repeals it, people come back and reinstate it and repeal it. And it was a system where the legislature always had the final word on whether or not a ballot initiative would take an effect. The Utah Supreme Court, because someone finally challenged them in court, said, you do not get the last word on all of this, because the Utah Constitution says that the people have the same right as the legislature to pass laws, reform their system of government, and the fact that you keep repealing this, you can't do that. You do not have more power than the people. And so you can make changes to whatever law was passed, but those changes have to be targeted, and they can't be expansive. And by repealing it, it'll be expansive. So if this does get on the ballot and it fails, Prop 4 is the process that remains in place. If it gets on the ballot and it passes, Prop 4 is repealed, and then we go back to probably what we had beforehand, which is what happened after the legislature repealed it, known as SB 200. So that's... Ant Squad says, aren't those texts illegal? I never signed up for RNC texts. No, they're not. They're really not illegal. You got on a list somewhere and they bought the list. Although if you've got an iPhone, it's a lot of times I don't see these texts, because in your iPhone, they have created a thing that basically filters these out. It's in your iMessage, and somehow, I'm not going to go through how to do it because I'm not tech support, but there's a folder now called Unknown Senders. That's where all these messages get sent to. And I usually don't even know that I have one until I go and check it every couple of days, or someone says, hey, did you see this text? That's where they go. But iPhones really put a crimp in these political texts. But you got on a list somewhere, and that's why you are now getting these texts. It's not illegal. Let's see. Any other questions here? Cade Morgan says, dumb question. Is the repeal of Prop 4 going to be on the ballot for November? If so, what are the district maps going to be for the midterms if it's being voted on at the same time? Different issue. That's a whole different thing. We don't know what the district maps are going to be. As you know, the judge put in place a map that created a Democratic-leaning district in Salt Lake County. That ruling has been appealed to the Utah Supreme Court by the legislature. At the same time, a group of Republican officials led by Representative Celeste Malloy and Burgess Owens are suing in federal court. So there's two lawsuits going on over these maps. And they're suing in federal court trying to block the map. There's going to be a hearing on the federal court one in downtown at the federal court building on Wednesday. That'll be the first hearing that we've had on this. But who knows what's going to happen with this? And I don't really have time to break down all the legal arguments. What I can say, I will try to paraphrase what the legislature is saying. The legislature is saying that under the Utah Constitution, now this is the appeal that is in the Utah Supreme Court. This is the original lawsuit that got the maps thrown out. They're saying that the Utah Constitution specifically says the legislature draws the maps. And that is true. The Utah Constitution says that. That is 100% true. But the way that Prop 4 gets around that is the Independent Redistricting Commission submits maps to the legislature, and then the legislature has to vote them up or down. They can propose their own map, but it has to follow the rules of Prop 4. That's how Prop 4 got around that. And what the legislature is saying, that when the judge implemented this map that did not come from the legislature, it came from the plaintiffs in the case, and the legislature didn't vote on it, and they had no input into it, and the public had no input into it, that violates the Constitution. So that's the first lawsuit, and that's the appeal at the Utah Supreme Court. The second lawsuit in federal court is trying to block this map from being used at all. And what they want is they want the legislature to go back to the drawing board and draw a new map. And all of this is being done with the deadline, like the big deadline for all of this is March 9th. That is the day the federal candidates start filing for office. And once candidates start filing for office, when candidates say where they're going to be running, it's really hard to put a different map in place. It is possible. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it is possible, and I've said this before, the legislature could once again move the dates of the filing dates, the primary, move that all back. Our primary election is in June. It used to be in September. So that would not be too difficult to do. But that March 9th date is coming up. Remember, the legislature already moved the filing dates for federal candidates from January 2nd back to March 9th to give them time to appeal the judge's ruling to the Utah Supreme Court. And then we've got this other lawsuit coming in from the federal courts. And you have to wonder what's going to happen with that lawsuit, because the U.S. Supreme Court just rejected a challenge to the California maps that were drawn for purely partisan reasons. And I have to wonder if because of that, would they take a challenge to Utah's maps? I don't know, depending on what happens in federal court. So all of this is happening, and we've got just a couple of weeks left before that deadline. Again, as they say in the Premier League, squeaky bum time. Let's see, going over to TikTok, let's see what we have here. Beth Aroni says, you think they're going to make it geographically? If I were a betting man, and I'm not, I would say it's more likely than not, given the number of signatures that they turned in on Sunday. Given the number of signatures that were already in the pipeline, added to what they turned in on Sunday, I think it's more likely than not, but who knows, right? That's what this is going to come down to, and it was always going to come down to the geographical requirement. And don't discount this effort to get people to take their signatures off of the petitions, because that's what sunk the Count My Vote petition in 2018. When they were gathering signatures to get on the ballot in 2018, they initially had enough to get on the ballot. And then there was an effort by a group that wanted to keep the caucus and convention system. They were called Keep My Voice. And they went around and contacted people who had already given their names or already put their names on the petitions to remove them. And they got enough people. I think it was like 100 people spread across 2 Senate districts, and that was enough to drop them below the requirement. And so that ballot initiative did not make the ballot in 2018. So there is precedent for this. And Count My Vote went to the Utah Supreme Court to say that to challenge the ability to let people take their names off of the petition, and the Supreme Court said no, that's fine. So that's the main thing. That's the big issue. There is actually a bill in the legislature right now that would allow people to take their name off of the petition they signed for a candidate. And they also wanted to make it so that when you sign a petition to help a candidate get on the ballot, those names are going to be posted online. And given the animosity and hostility by Republican parties, particularly Davis County, towards candidates who gather signatures to get on the ballot. Do you think that those people whose names are going to be posted online are going to think twice about exposing their information to the to opponents of signature gathering for candidates? That's that's alarming. Blake says the signers' names are made public. Yes, in case I have friends, family I need to make an appeal to. Yes, the signers' names are public. They're posted online. I walked you through how to get to vote.utah.gov. There are some other places that will that have the lists as well, and you can see who has signed and those signatures that have been verified. Looking here, La Taranja says, how will the hearing be available to the public? I don't think the federal court ones are. You can actually go down to the federal court and watch it in person. If I want to cover it, I actually have to go down there, and I haven't done this yet. I probably will, but I have to go down there with a piece of paper and get permission from the judge to bring my devices in, because you can't have cell phones in there. You can't have computers, and you have to get permission from the judge to have that. So maybe. Delena's Cats, going back to Prop 4 and the Independent Commission offering maps. They said, well, they ignored all the maps from the Independent Redistricting Commission. They did in 2021, but that was a different framework. Under Prop 4, the legislature, when they got the maps from the Independent Redistricting Commission, they would have to either vote those maps up or down, and if they vote them down, they have to explain why they violated Prop 4. They could not just vote them down and then put their own in place. When they repealed Prop 4 and put the Independent Redistricting Commission in place, they changed it from an actual independent commission to an advisory role. So they submitted maps to the legislature, but there was no obligation that the maps had to vote on those. There was no obligation that the legislature had to vote on those maps. And so they didn't. Prop 4 would make it so they would have to vote on the maps by this independent commission. And while this fight is all centered on the congressional maps, because those are the ones that were challenged in court, the real fight is legislative maps, the 75 House districts and the 29 Senate districts. Because the way that they draw those maps, if Prop 4 stays in place and we have an independent redistricting commission, they cannot consider where incumbents live. And incumbents could end up in the same district with each other. That happens after redistricting, but essentially the incumbents get to kind of draw their own lines. And if they want, and if the Republican majority wants to punish somebody, they will draw them into another district. It happened in 2021 when they drew these current lines. Suzanne Harrison, who was a Democrat in the House representing an area in Draper, a kind of conservative area, but she had won that seat, and she was kind of a thorn in the side of the Republicans. When they redrew the maps, surprise, surprise, she ended up in the same district with Republican Jeff Stenquist. Those are the ones that got combined in the House. And she saw the writing on the wall and decided to not run for another term. She ended up running for Salt Lake County Council. But that's one of the processes. That's the things that they do when they draw these maps. And so if you put this in the hand of an independent redistricting commission, they can't do that anymore. And these maps are going to be drawn blind. They cannot consider where an incumbent lives. So you could have two very powerful members of the legislature end up in the same House or Senate district, and then one of them's out. And they can't move to another district like they can on the congressional maps. That's what this fight is all about. They do not want to lose the ability to draw their own districts. It is voters, it is elected officials picking their voters rather than voters picking their representatives. That's the part that they don't want to talk about. Minnie Finney on Instagram said, why did they ask for more time to gather signatures so late in the game if they already had them? And how did they get so many last minute? Something smells fishy. As I have explained before, nothing smells fishy. There's nothing fishy. It seems weird. It seems like a conspiracy. It seems strange. That's not the case at all. It is just the way that these gigantic campaigns work. Once someone signs a petition packet, they have 30 days to turn that packet in. And they have to get those packets from the far, those packets have to go to, they have to be collected, and then there's an internal verification process. So they had people who are going over these packets to make sure that the people who sign them or count the number of people who are actually registered voters who live in the Senate district or in the county they're supposed to, and so on and so forth, and then they're turned in. You don't just fill up a packet and then turn it at the clerk. That's not how this works. So there was their own processes going in. And so you could have had signature packets that were started several weeks ago, part of this last minute dump. So it wasn't fishy. That's not fishy at all. I know there are people out there who are trying to engagement bait, people trying to get your attention, saying, something's weird and this isn't right. No, it's not. It's a really boring explanation. It feels weird because they've been behind. But they've been behind on the number of verified signatures. We had no idea how many signatures and packets were out there. And apparently it was quite a lot. So that's the first one. The second one, why did they ask for more time? As I said before, they went to the Utah Supreme Court last week asking for an extension to the deadline. A couple of things there. One, they were claiming that Utah Customs says that when the deadline for something like this falls on a weekend, then usually you go to the next business day, which was Tuesday. That's not the case. It was weird that they waited until the last second to do it. That seems strange that they waited until Wednesday of last week and then tried to get a decision within 48 hours, less than 48 hours from the justices. And they also said that the violence and intimidation that was directed towards their signature gatherers had caused them to lose about 300 signatures, and maybe 50 signature gatherers quit. And that was the other reason they were asking for an extension. It seemed like 3 extra days over 300 signatures was a little bit too much. So those were the arguments that they made. Part of it is you can't ask for an extension once the deadline is already passed. So they had to do that beforehand. The other thing is, I wonder if this is I suspect one of the reasons they asked for the extension is they felt like they were close, and they wanted to make sure that they had a few more days to build a buffer. So why not ask for an extension? The next business day argument seems like a valid argument to make. The justices didn't go for it, especially in such a small amount of time, but that's probably why they did it. I wonder if they didn't do that to try and set themselves up for a lawsuit down the line if they fail to reach the signature requirement. Again, I don't have anything to back that up, but I have seen in the past so many of these ballot initiatives, when they fail to get on the ballot, they go to the courts. And they do it to either try to extend deadlines, or they do it to try and force the acceptance of signatures or get a decree putting them on the ballot. And they, say they do fall short, they don't get to the 26 Senate districts and they fall short. It's quite possible that they could go to the courts and say, well, we asked for a 3-day deadline extension and we didn't get it. And had we gotten it, it's possible, maybe even likely, that we would have gotten it. So I don't know if that was part of the thinking here. It seems like that might be a valid thing to think. I did ask organizers about that, whether they may be setting themselves up for a lawsuit down the line, and they said I'm reading too much into it. And maybe I am, but that's just something to watch. Let's see. Looking here. Nathan Detroit, one of our subscribers at Utah Political Watch, and he is on our Discord. If you want to join our Discord, where we talk about things like this, we've already had a big we've had a big discussion about this large number of signatures and the Supreme Court case and anything else you want to talk about. If you become a paying subscriber at UtahPoliticalWatch.news, you can join our Discord as well. But Nathan Detroit says on YouTube, Rob Axon's comment does make sense that some signature packets take time to fill, so keep them out there until the last minute. Quite possibly. So yeah, while it feels weird, I get it. They have a whole bunch of signatures at the last second. And you couple that with the fact that there's an active criminal investigation about signatures in Utah County because some apparently fraudulent signatures, maybe hundreds of fraudulent signatures, were submitted. It's easy to make that leap, but it's ill-informed. That's not what is happening. And so that's what it's muddying the water and it's connecting dots that aren't there. So let's see. Oh boy. Well, we've been at this for more than an hour and it's been fun and I really enjoy it. If anyone has any final comments, let me know. Old Dad on TikTok says, we don't know till we know. Exactly. This is going to be an excruciating process. We'll start to get an idea of how many signatures each county has left to verify. And I'm sure the clerks are just loving the fact that they're going to get calls from all sorts of reporters saying, this is how many signatures we have left. And then everybody gets to do the math and figure out, well, if they have this many signatures left and so on and so forth. So again, clerks have 21 days from when the signatures were turned in to verify. That's March 7th. They'll restart the signature verification process tomorrow. Now, the numbers that they're going to release tomorrow morning have nothing to do with the signatures that they just turned in. These will be signatures that were verified on Friday. Those are the ones. There's always at least a day lag between the signatures being verified and when they're released. So what we see on Monday has going to have nothing to do with the signature dump we saw on Sunday. Those will be the signatures verified on Friday. And there's always a lag between when a signature is turned in and when it goes through the verification process. And as I said before, it is safe to assume that there were probably 15 to 20,000 signatures already in the pipeline before the big dump of packets on on Sunday. Crenard says, if this does get on the ballot, do you think it passes? I'm not in the prediction business. But what I will say is this. Utah is a Republican state. It is a majority Republican state. And this effort is being driven by Republicans. Now, we've seen polling that shows that Utahns think an independent redistricting commission should be the ones to handle line drawing. They like the idea. They don't think that lawmakers should be drawing their own lines. There's a lot of support for that. So I don't know what happens if it gets on the ballot. I can tell you this. Republicans in the legislature wanted this on the ballot this year pretty bad, and they've got a whole bunch of other stuff on the ballot, and they think that their voters are going to show up to support Republicans at the ballot and to approve a repeal of Prop 4, approve a constitutional amendment that will allow them to repeal a ballot initiative passed by the citizenry. It's the same thing they tried to do with Amendment D in 2024. Something like that is probably going to be on the ballot again. They're going to have a bunch of stuff on the ballot that they think that their voters want to pass. There is a reason why they repealed HB 267, which is the union busting bill. That is the one where there was a referendum to put that on the 2026 ballot. They didn't want that on the ballot. They didn't want that measure on the ballot at all because it's going to bring angry voters to the polls, voters who are mad at the legislature for passing that. So they repealed it back in December. They did that for a reason. That is the very reason why they did it. It was a political reason, not because they they thought they screwed up by passing this union busting bill. They repealed it because they didn't want to give voters, angry voters, a reason to show up at the polls. That's it. So I don't know what is going to happen. All I know is this: when Donald Trump is not on the ballot, and he's not going to be on the ballot in 2026, turnout looks a lot different than it did before. It did in presidential election years. Bryce Lee says, let's say it does pass. What happens regarding the midterms and the current map? Again, as I just explained a little while ago, this Prop 4 repeal strategy is related to the maps, but it has nothing to do with what map we're going to use in the midterms. That's going to hinge on two court cases that are going on simultaneously. One, the Utah legislature has appealed the judge's decision to put the current map in place. They've appealed that to the Utah Supreme Court. And at the same time, there is a federal lawsuit led by Representatives Celeste Malloy and Burgess Owens trying to block that map. And so that's what's going to determine which map we have in the midterms. This Prop 4 repeal, it's really not going to have any impact until we get to the 2031 redistricting cycle, which, by the way, Utah's going to have a fifth congressional seat if everything goes, if the trends continue, and I'm pretty sure that they will. So don't conflate the two, but yeah, that's what's happening there. Last check on questions or comments. And again, thank you everybody for joining me. I hope I'm explaining this in a way that you can understand. I kind of feel like that's my job. And I felt like I had to do it after I saw so much speculation online about where did these signatures come from? Did they cheat? Did they make them up out of thin air? And, you know, it takes a lot of effort to make those phone calls, talk to people, find out what has actually happened, present them in an article, and then come on here and talk about it. Put it on multiple platforms. Today, I wrote an article about this, and then I recorded a video that is up on Instagram and TikTok, and I'm about to upload it to YouTube. So, you know, that's what this whole thing. That's the process. That's my process as an independent journalist, and it's a lot of work. And I do it because that's what the people who support my work want. They want me to explain this sort of thing and tell you the story of what's really happening in Utah politics. I say this in my videos all the time, but if you want to understand what's happening in Utah politics, if you want to keep on top of what's happening, make sure you're following me on whatever platform you're watching, or you can go to my website, utahpolitics.news, sign up for my newsletter there. If you feel like it, you can throw a couple bucks in the tip jar. I'm completely funded by readers and subscribers, no corporations, no billionaires, no companies, none of that stuff. My readers, my subscribers are the ones who tell me what to do. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for now. It's getting close to dinner time. I have to go and cook dinner for my lovely wife who is pursuing her PhD right now. So she does her classwork and I do the housework. And so I'm going to go and cook some dinner for her. And then we'll just go from there. But I'll have more on this as the week goes on. I'll break down the numbers as they're released tomorrow, try to get some idea of the trends of where we're headed with this whole thing. Plus, we'll cover the legislature. We didn't even talk about what's happening up at the legislature. So we'll have another live stream sometime this week. I hope you all had a great President's Day weekend. You know what the best day about a 3-day weekend is? A 4-day work week. So tomorrow's Tuesday, it'll feel like Monday, but it's Tuesday, and then Friday will feel like Thursday, but it'll actually be Friday. It'll be fantastic. So that's it. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for joining me on the live stream. Give me a follow if you haven't already. Go to my website, utahpolitics.news. You can read all my journalism. You can sign up for my newsletter there. Follow me on whatever platform you follow, Blue Sky, Threads, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. It's all available there for you. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Dinner time for me. Go enjoy your evening, and I'll stay on top of the news. And if you have any questions, hit me up with a DM, send me an email. I love hearing from all of my viewers. But that's going to do it for me tonight, and we will talk to you all later. Thank you so much.